Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's February 7th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And no real surprise. This thing, we continue to see this over and over. You get a little mild correction or a little sideways or maybe one big down day, and then it rockets up. Same thing, we had a little mild sideways, and boom, it rockets up. This market does not want to sell off. It wants to go higher. Um, I talked about it in the mid-morning report. My guess is this thing's going to continue to go up until at least the election. They're not going to let this market sell off. There's too much on the line. I don't see it happening. We might get a correction between now and then, but it's probably going to continue to move sideways to up um, until after the election. That'd be my guess, probably. Again, we don't trade what we think, though. We'll wait and see what the market gives us each day, and that's what we'll trade. But it looks like it was a really bullish day. Again, that's deceptive. Um, we'll flip over to the other chart, and you can see we spent 90% of the day going sideways in a tight range. We had some quick movement up early on, and then it was just sideways after that. So, you look at it here, it looks like a big up day. If you look at the closings, the market closed way up again, probably made an all new high again. Market just keeps going higher and keeps going higher, and they keep uh, running the headlines of new highs and how the market's doing. And my guess is it's going to keep doing this all the way through the election. So um, we don't care what it does. We just want to go with it. So we won't argue with it. But again, there's not a lot of good trading. There's just not a good chance to, because most of the movement came within an hour and then it was over. First couple hours of the morning, you had a little movement, and then it's over. And then the market's just doing nothing except chopping you to pieces. So, it's not the greatest trading, and it's not, even though the market's rallying, this is not easy to trade type price action. So somebody actually sent me an email today and asked me if this stuff still works. That there's a lot of the examples in the manual and on the site are old. Well, the price action's still the same. It goes through phases, and we're going through one of those phases. It's a little different phase, uh, but the basics work. I've been doing this, trading the same way for 25 plus years. It works exactly the same now as it did 25 years ago. Price action is price action. Yeah, the market changes. It gets different phases. You get periods where it rallies straight up for days and days, and then you get periods where it sells off straight down for days and days, and then you get periods where it just chops sideways and you don't get much movement. And right now we got, I would call this a combination of a upward market that just doesn't go anywhere. You just goes in spurts, and if you don't catch that spurt, you don't catch the move, and the rest of the day it does nothing. But let's flip over to the 2000 tick chart, and you can see what I'm talking about. And here it is. And we spent 90% of the day inside this gray or just outside of this gray range. And so really this started at about 9 o'clock. We still had a little more up movement. That I would say it really started ranging around 9:30, right there around 9:29, 9:30. And then it didn't do anything. That was, prices were at 50.13.75. Well, they only went to 50.19, and they never went really any lower than 5,004. So we had about a 10 or 12 point move the rest of the day just chopping around. So that stuff's hard to trade. And there's a few trades in here early on, and then from right here, it bounced off this trend line and shot straight up and never came back. They just bounced sideways after that. And it's difficult trading. We had this early move right here, right into 7. So all this was going on at 7 o'clock. And then you got a few trades in here before it shot up again. And really, you got two perfect measured legs up. Still the same way we always teach it. It's perfect price action. It's just not smooth, and it's not easy in the way it gets there. I mean, it really took from 9:30 all the way to 12:30 before it really made the measured move. So it took it 3 hours to go 5 points, 5 or 6 points, and it chopped all in about a 10 or 12 point range in between. So it's just difficult price action. There's not a lot of trades. It's mostly just mixed trading, chopping back and forth. Of course, from about 11:30, we had another little uptrend here. So you got a couple of more trades, and then next thing you know, it's 2:30. I'm surprised they haven't run it up at 4 o'clock. I'm surprised they didn't run it up in the after hours or run it down again, so they can get another head start and run it back up again. Believe it or not, the market closed kind of quietly in very low volume. I just think people are afraid to buy it up here. Nobody wants to sell this market, but there's just not a lot of buying coming in up here around 5,000. But they'll run it down somewhere in the overnight or something. They'll run it down, and we'll get a correction, and they'll start buying it again, and it'll run straight back up, most likely. I expect to continue. Like I said, I expect that to continue through the election, because they're not going to let this thing sell off going into November. They're not going to allow it. So anyway, early on we were just going sideways. We had this before, and there's just no way to get in any of this before 7 o'clock really. Too dangerous. There's one trade here. It was obvious. It was pretty obvious right here that this was a really strong trend, but that doesn't really. That bar is only 5 ticks, but the problem is it doesn't make the swing low there. So you really, it's iffy getting into that. You really want it to be a signal bar off the key entry point, and that's technically not. It's very low risk, but I'd wait, and so I didn't mark it. Runs up, and then finally we start trending down, and we confirm this trend here, and that is a second entry short. Now that's a little bit congested. However, there is room to really, you can get out here. I think I can't remember if it's 1 tick short or something, so you might have had to try to steal it. It didn't matter, it went on down, but you might have wanted to try to sneak in an extra tick up here just to make sure you had room to get out. But it's a double bottom, so that's a first entry, second entry, and it's only 5 ticks. And it does confirm this down trend line. We did have a break of this one in a new high. It looked like we had another trend line going up, but it looked like we were, at that point, we got a confirmed trend line going down. Second entry off the key entry point, very low risk. Maybe you take that one. Same thing here, except it's just too congested, and you got to go short right at the lows, and that's right into the midline too. You can't really take that one. I think somebody sent me that trade asking me about it, and I'll just give it a little different color there, and you can see it. You just can't trade that. And this one's iffy, really iffy. I marked it green. But if you wait a few minutes, you finally get a break here, and you get a first entry, and then a second entry, you get a double top. Really, there's a triple top across there. Triple test, very, very signal bar. That's the trade to take. And if you caught that one, maybe that's all you need for the day, because you probably got a runner on this. There's a 6, 7 point move there. You ought to be able to get 4 or 5 points out of that. And it looks like it's going to try to make a second move down. There's another second entry here, but that's an inside bar. This is your signal bar. It doesn't really qualify. And then the next thing you know, you bounce right off the lows. So you got a new low right there. So you got a first entry, second entry. If it breaks above that, you can treat that as a failure, and that is right off the key entry point. It does confirm the key entry point. It is a higher low after a failed break lower here off this range. And not only do you have the trend line, you got the range behind you too. Again, it's a fairly low risk bar, 6 ticks. And technically, it is a second entry long. If you look here, you got a first entry. Actually, if you go by the counts, there's another pullback right there, and it breaks higher. But really, hopefully you can clearly see that's 2 legs back to the key entry point. You can treat that like a second entry and go long right there. And boom, this thing takes off. And if you catch this one, you definitely probably don't need anything else for the day. But you don't get another chance to enter it until here. And the only reason I semi like this was because it pretty much kind of confirms that there's a secondary trend line running up through there, as you can see, which you'll sometimes get on these real strong days. But the key is it got above the EMA, or I'm sorry, not above the EMA, above the midline, and you see the midline's holding there twice. And this is a first entry, and there was a second entry here, but that signal bar is not good enough, and you've only tested that midline one time. But when it comes back and tests that midline trend line again and gives you such a bullish bar, that's a higher low. I like that one. Again, if this one would have made a lower high swing low here, I would have said go long on it too, probably. But it runs up. It looks like it gets a little bit of an overshoot here, actually. And then next thing you know, we're trending lower again. And we couldn't get back up here. But we hadn't made the measured move yet. So you would still expect that we're probably going to try to retest this high, which it does here on this break. But notice you get a run up, close outside, two swings to a new high that turns down. If that was a little bit more bearish, I'd probably say, hey, maybe you take that trade, but I just don't think it's quite there. Turns out to be a good move, and it runs down, it bounces right off the trend line again, but it's just a first entry, and you don't really get a high or low here. And next thing you know, you're trying to make a second leg down, and you're outside the trend channel line. So that's the first break. So you'd expect prices, I mean, that's two. You're trying to make two legs up, so you'd expect a retest and maybe to try to reach this measured leg here. But you just can't enter here, and then it comes up short here. If that was more bearish, you could probably argue a triple test and a double top there, but it's just not bearish enough. Again, that's moved a little too far to call that a lower high. You do get a failure here, but you're not looking for that right in the middle of a range this tight. You just can't trade that. Just wait and see if you get a long down here at the lows, and sure enough, you get another test down here. You got your close outside and move to a new low. You're way away from the EMA. You get a good signal bar that closes back in the range. It did peak outside, but I mean, that's a really bullish bar right there. Just go long right there. Oops, didn't mean to move that over like that. And this one just takes off, runs on up. You might have got a runner off this one. I don't know. It did come back here. Depending on how you played it, you might have had to give it a little extra room. But it was good for an easy scalp. But I think you might have got a runner on this, just depending on how you played it. Come up, you get a break, move to a new high. And it does break outside up here trying to make that measured move. And notice it still didn't quite make it. And then it comes back. And there's actually a hidden two legs in there and then a higher low right here. And that higher low would be a second entry on its own. It does close above the EMA. It does close above the midline. So I like maybe trying to ride that up. I marked it green. It's not a perfect setup, but it is a second entry. And we did break out up here, so it's possible we're still going to try to push higher. And once it started trending up, I'd look for a measured move equal to this one. You see we got basically a perfect measured move up, plus we reached our other measured move. So you can't enter in here. You just right into to that resistance. No shorts really yet. And notice you get another two legs down. So that's a second entry long and then a higher low. I like that one. We can't even get back to this trend line yet, but we hadn't got back to the highs yet. If this would have been right into resistance, maybe you second think it. We've already pushed out twice, so we probably kind of cleared this out right now. And you can see we did. We just kind of got into a range. It's really between this high and the measured move there. So this is all too tight right in here. I don't see anything. But notice you do get a triple test here with a double bottom. I marked it green. It looks like we've got a trend working up here, and that's the first close outside. I didn't really like it because we closed back inside this range, but notice how long we'd been outside it. We've been outside it for since a little bit before 12:30, and here it is over after 1:30. So over an hour we've been outside that range. So I think you can pretty much play this pink range and treat this as a failed break lower and a little double bottom, and just try to trade that back into the range to the highs. And it actually goes further than that. You probably wouldn't have got anything but a scalp out of it, but and we run on up and we actually make more. Notice how we make the measured move. This dash line is a measured move, and this dash line is a measured move based on the pink range. And that's another reason I like that one, because it dropped a measured move and made a perfect double bottom. And then of course we actually overshoot it up here, the measured move. So, but we do get a close outside new high. It's not, it's questionable if that's a convincing close. So I wouldn't short this without a lower high, and you just don't really get one. And that pretty much takes you into 230. This was tempting to short here, but the next bar didn't break below it, and it's after 230. And so by the time it gets a break lower, you're well into 230, and I wouldn't risk it then. It looks a little congested. So, and there it was. Again, it's just not many trades. Again, you could probably argue for some more greens in and around here, but you just have to be careful. You get chopped up in this stuff, and really the way to trade it is to find your consistent support or your consistent resistance and hope you get a setup, and occasionally you'll get a trend line in there somewhere that you can trade as well. And other than that, you just got to be careful in this, especially when you get in the middle of this range, because you can get chopped up in a minute right in there. So just be real careful. But there it is. That's how I saw it today. Again, all your movement came from 7 o'clock to, I'd say, just 9 o'clock. First 2 hours, and then it's just junk after that. Now, there's a couple of trades in there, but there isn't much. And that's just the way it's been lately. And this market feels manipulated. I'm not saying it is. I don't know. It feels manipulated. It feels odd. It doesn't feel natural. And, we've had periods like this before that didn't feel natural. And eventually things work back into normal price movements and so forth. But this just feels manipulated to me. And again, I'm not saying it is. Not saying it's not either, but price action is really odd. It's not easy trading. Just be patient, be disciplined, wait for the right setups. Don't force trades, because if you do, you'll get burned. And when it's like this, you can get burned regardless. So just be careful trading it. Make sure that you almost want to make sure they're sure things, and there's not a lot of sure things in there, and that's the whole problem. There's not a lot of sure things in price action like that. Sure things are going to be off the support, off the resistance, or off the trend lines working up or working down. And this whole thing has an overall upward bias to it. So there's not a lot of shorts in here either. That's the problem. This whole sideways thing still has somewhat of an upward bias, because here's your target up here, and prices are trying to work back. You got your trend channel with the first break, so prices are trying to work up there to make a new high. And so you still got to just always remember the bias. And even though this is flat and this is a range and you trade it like a range, it still has an upward bias from this big trend from earlier on. So don't lose sight of that. And that's what happens to people. They narrow in, and they'll narrow into some little spot and say, okay, right here it's a range, and they try to trade this range, and you got to be real careful trading it. You can't make a mistake, hardly, or you'll get burned. So just be real careful. And remember the bias. The bias is up. So, all right. There's really not much else we can say about it. Just another one of those days. We'll see what tomorrow brings. Maybe tomorrow will be a little better. Maybe we'll get a trend day, a good trend day that continues. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get more of the same. Wouldn't surprise me. But Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you